In April, we bought a cute little house in my husband's tiny hometown in the Midwest, out in the middle of nowhere among farms and sprawling fields. We immediately started on a long list of projects to get this house to a place that is livable and comfortable for us and our family to visit. Hi, I'm Dixie, and I've been here in this house almost 6 weeks now, and this place has changed a lot. We plan to do some bigger renovations later on, but for now it's mostly cosmetic stuff and maintenance on a house that has been empty for almost a year. So let me give you a little tour and a little history and tell you what we've been up to. This is a small 1,000 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house built in 1941 in the minimal traditional style. This style was ubiquitous in the 1930s and 40s in America, and its defining features are that it doesn't really have any. Unlike in the 20s, which saw distinctive design styles like Craftsman, Colonial Revival, or Spanish, or the modern ranch that came in the post-war period, people during the Great Depression were broke, and if they could afford to build a small house from scratch, they often went with what they saw as a simple, timeless, but modern design. Nothing ostentatious or trendy, although sometimes you do see details here and there that are from like the Federal or cottage style. These were starter homes for young families. You could buy a whole kit, ship it into town on a train car, and build it yourself. You probably are familiar with these Sears catalog homes, or you could just buy the plans, the blueprints, and buy your own supplies. They were typically around 1,000 square feet and lacked features like formal dining rooms. But this house uses its square footage well. It has deep closets, the rooms are a decent size, and the house has some cute features like this bay window nook in the front and arched doorways. And it's a solidly built house. Honestly, this house has more straight lines and right angles than my 21st century house back in Texas. But all of the features here are very modest. It's got glass doorknobs, a cheaper version of the classic crystal that you might find in a Victorian home. It's got wood floors, which we're hoping to take out the carpet in the living room soon. A few original light fixtures are still intact, and they saved the original shades from the other rooms. Right after we closed on this house, I managed to buy one piece of furniture and get it back here. Our kitchen is tiny, so I wanted something just outside the kitchen to hold things like tools and office supplies within easy reach, so I saw this dresser on Facebook Marketplace. I loved the Art Deco design and thought it would go perfectly with the age of the home. Then I found out this is actually a really cool piece that was designed by a guy named Bel Geddes. He was a theater production designer. He also designed furniture and did concept art for cars and airplanes. He designed this piece in 1933 for the Simmons Company for the Chicago World's Fair. The tagline was "A Century of Progress," and everything was very modern, streamlined, Art Deco themed. There were even a handful of model homes built for display. I wonder if this dresser was shown in one of those homes. 5 of those homes were later moved after the fair to lakefront property in Indiana, right outside the Indiana Dunes National Park, and they host tours once a year to see inside. I'm hoping that I'll be able to do that one of these days. At first I thought the dresser was wood, but turns out it's steel. Steel furniture, especially kitchen cabinets, became popular in the 1930s, but then of course with World War II, steel was rationed, and after a brief resurgence in the 50s, metal furniture never really made it back into homes unless you're going for like an industrial style. It's durable, but it's also cold and kind of loud. This piece is a bit scratched up, but there are no dents and all the drawers work fine. I'm really happy with it. Speaking of furniture, another piece I knew I wanted was a vanity. There is only one bathroom in this house, and for about 2 weeks we had cousins come stay with us. So that's 6 people in a house with 1 toilet. Anyway, I needed a place to do makeup and skincare outside of the bathroom. Keeping with the 1930s, 40s theme, I found this waterfall vanity, again on Facebook Marketplace. Waterfall is the name for a style of furniture with these curved tops or sides. It's the quintessential style from this era, but it was actually the equivalent of like IKEA furniture of its day. It was mass manufactured using a plywood base covered in wood veneer rather than hand carved from solid wood. But you could do those cool curves with the veneer that you can't do with solid wood, so it seemed novel at the time. I've heard it called newlywed furniture because it was cheap, sometimes a third of the price of real wood furniture, and newlyweds who were still living in their parents' house could buy a matching set and make their one bedroom feel modern and unique. Today we associate this style of furniture with Art Deco, although it's not really Art Deco. It's influenced by it, certainly. True Art Deco never really caught on in residential design in America. Most Americans saw it as faddish and preferred classic or antique design styles, which is why you see a ton of revivalist styles in old magazines and catalogs. Early American, English Jacobean, Renaissance, 18th century French, and the first Victorian revival pops up in the 30s. I suspect that experiencing the Great Depression would make you yearn for simpler times of the past and be skeptical of modernism. To them, these older styles were timeless and would never go out of style. As for my waterfall vanity, this one is a bit roughed up, but mostly in good shape, except somewhere along the line someone rubbed the surface with a refinishing product that smeared all over the veneer and it looks splotchy. That might be a project I tackle in the future, but not today. One thing I did do was replace the knobs on the drawers, which were not original. These are reproduction Bakelite knobs from Etsy. Bakelite is a resin product and a precursor to modern plastic. It was quite trendy in the 30s, but if you try to find original knobs, they're really expensive. My plan is to buy a pair of vintage lamps for extra light, and since this vanity didn't come with a seat, I bought a little stool to go with it. I also got a dresser to go in my daughter's room. This one was free from a family member, so it was already spray painted blue, rather poorly. This piece is probably from the turn of the 20th century and is a very common style, and it's probably oak underneath. I lined the drawers with some adorable 1970s contact paper I found in one of the closets. I'm glad I have a space to put my kids' toys in instead of all over the floor, and I don't hate the color. It's a similar tone to the wall color, which we had the main rooms painted before we arrived. I referenced Sherwin-Williams' historical paint colors. We chose Cascade Green for the living room and Orchid for my daughter's room, which was actually very close to the original color in that room. Our bedroom is Classic Light Buff, which was also close to the original color. I'm glad we painted though, because the old paint was dingy and pretty gross. I think the previous owners may have been smokers. Leaning into that blue dresser, I ordered a rug with the pink and blue colors in it, and I bought 15 yards of this Indian block print cotton, also with pink and blue hues, to make curtains. After washing and taking measurements, I tore the fabric into strips. Luckily, the print goes all the way to the selvage, so I didn't have to hem the sides of the fabric, just the top and bottom. And this sewing machine is not mine, although it is the same model. My mother-in-law actually bought this machine years ago, and I liked it so much I bought one of my own, so I'm familiar with its quirks, although this one's missing some accessories. But before I could put up the curtains, remember I said we'd painted the rooms? We also got the window trim painted. It was some of the only trim in the house that was painted to begin with. And when we first got here, I used those little lead paint test swabs. This was some of the only paint that came up as possible lead, so I didn't want to try to strip it. I just wanted to paint it and seal it up to be safe. And while the room does have blackout roller shades, light still peeks in through the sides. So to help my kids sleep, we had used painter's tape to hold the shade to the trim. But when I was ready to remove it and hang up the curtains, it pulled the paint off. Not just the new paint, but the underlayer as well. The layer I suspected was lead-based. In my preschooler's bedroom. I tried peeling off as much as I could. Luckily it came off in big chunks. Then I primed the raw wood that was left and used leftover paint to finish the trim. Again. I was also diligent in cleaning up around the room afterward. just in case. Finally, I was able to install these wraparound curtain rods so the curtains could cover the sides of the roller shades. I had bought enough extra yardage to sew up a bed skirt as well. I ripped the remaining printed fabric into 15-inch strips, sewed up the sides, and again, since it's salvage, I didn't need to finish the seams. Then I proceeded to hem 400 inches of fabric and then gather up 400 inches of fabric. For the section that sits under the mattress, I just bought a length of 36-inch wide muslin. No need to trim except for on one short side. Once it's all together, I think it looks really nice. This is the room closest to being complete, although it still needs a headboard and some kind of book storage. The best or worst part of this house is outside. The previous owners were big gardeners. There are over 20 rose bushes all over this property. There is a huge old apple tree in the backyard that needs some TLC. The limbs are so heavy that they're propped up by stakes. But the real problem area I have to tackle is in the front yard. One entire side between the driveway and the walkway is just plants, no grass. So the old owners were elderly and I think they had trouble lifting the lawnmower over the short retaining wall edge, so they just converted that entire section into one big cottage garden. When we first arrived in April, hardly any plants were growing, so we had no idea what would be here. When we came back a month later, it was insane. Plants were everywhere. I had no way of getting into the plants to take care of them, and they were so overgrown with weeds. Some I couldn't tell if they were weeds or intentionally planted wildflowers. Other plants had spread out of control. Random weedy grass spikes popped up everywhere. There were nasty vines choking out the salvias and the daisies, and there was poison ivy. So much poison ivy. It was all wrapped up in the rose bushes and just snaked across everywhere. I didn't film much of this, sorry, but my mother-in-law and I cleaned out as much of the bad stuff as we could. And probably some legit plants as well that were just too entangled with weeds. It was awful. Next, I moved some plants to a side flower bed, which it was kind of late in the season to do this, and some I don't think are gonna make it. I cleared the area near the front bay window and planted 3 boxwood bushes. There are no plants in this front yard that are evergreen, so I wanted something to dress up the house when the perennials aren't growing. Then, over the course of several days and with help from my mother-in-law, I dug a trench from the front walkway across to the driveway and built a brick path. The flower beds are all edged with angled bricks. Just bricks. Bricks everywhere. So I decided to put them to good use and build a pathway. This serves a dual purpose. 1, I can more easily access the garden, and 2, my kid doesn't have to walk close to the busy street if she's running from the front door to the driveway. And I want to be clear that this is not the professional way to build a path. I really needed much more gravel and sand to line the trench, but that stuff is heavy and expensive, and if I ever want to pull up this path, I don't want to dig through layers and layers of sand. I also didn't have a tool to cut the bricks, so I just arranged them in a way that I could keep them intact. I had some pathway edging in the garage that I hammered in as well, but I didn't have enough for the full length on both sides. Once I filled in the cracks with sand, it was surprisingly sturdy, if not smooth. Being in the ground wore away the paint on half of each brick, which creates a cool pattern once they're laid out on the ground. The path looks like it's been there for decades, which is what I was going for. After that, we took some flagstones that used to be around these 2 crabapple trees and made a stepping stone path through the rest of the garden. I was able to underline the stones in some areas with cardboard to help keep the weeds at bay, but not everywhere, and 2 weeks later I'm already battling weeds again. I can tell this is going to be an ongoing war to keep the weeds out and the grass out without damaging the good plants. I love gardening. I have a big backyard garden back in Texas, and I'm a huge proponent of using native plants, but this is just unmanageable for someone who is not going to be here full time. I think I need to minimize and simplify the yard overall, but that's a big project for a later time. For something a little bit more fun and less backbreaking, we took a day trip to one of the biggest antique malls in the Midwest on the hunt for decorations for this house. This place was huge and I was shocked by some of the high prices for items. There were still some deals to be had, but most things were just nope. We came home with a few things for the walls, some framed art, an old map. I got this cute little glass dish to hold vanity items, and we also bought this massive dictionary. It's not just definitions, there are also illustrations and even a few full color pages. And this mirror. It's probably from the early 1900s and it is heavy. While we were out, we stopped by the Westcott House, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright in 1908. We didn't have time for the full 1.5 hour tour with a toddler in tow, but we did take a look around. It's, I think, the only one of his prairie-style houses in Ohio, and in the 1940s it was converted into apartments, so the museum people had to spend several years restoring it back to what it would have looked like in 1908. If you're into architectural history, there are Frank Lloyd Wright designed homes and buildings dotted all over the country, many of which are now museums that you can visit, and some you can even rent on Airbnb. The house was across the street from this cool old cemetery. It wasn't very well maintained, but we saw headstones from the 1850s. We're headed back to Texas soon, but we'll be back up here near the end of the summer, hopefully with a vehicle big enough to pick up furniture and haul it home. We can't get any more big pieces without help. Let me know if you liked this video. I know it's not normal sewing content, or not mostly sewing, but a lot of it is DIY, so I guess the name still fits, and I have plenty more to share as we continue to work on this house. Thank you so much for watching and for liking and subscribing, and until next time, happy antiquing. Bye.